Welcome to the Putback here on SNY.TV. I'm Ian Begley, SNY NBA insider, host of the show. We've got two great guests with us today to talk Knicks and the NBA for the next 20 minutes, half hour. First off, Tim Bontemps, senior NBA writer at ESPN, does a great job covering the league based here in New York. And Troy Mahabir, the Knicks recap. He's got a great show on YouTube. He's on Twitter. He's all over your social media, and he's actually has a show coming up, I think, 2 p.m., so keep an eye on that. But, fellas, as always, we're going to get it started here with the baseline. Knicks coming out slow at the Garden last night and getting down early. I think it was 12-0. Coming off that West Coast trip, sometimes you see that in the NBA, but Karl Towns gets them going with that personal 15-0 run, and then they kind of take off in the third quarter and coast to an easy win, surprisingly easy win. Tim, what did you make of that game yesterday, kind of a seesaw early on?
I mean, honestly, it just sort of reinforced where the Heat have been for the past couple of months, right? I mean, going back to the trade deadline, they're now, I believe, 4-14 since trading Jimmy Butler, and obviously a lot of that has been because of horrible fourth quarters. They came into last night's game getting outscored by 29 points per 100 possessions in the fourth quarter, which is just unfathomably bad. Obviously, the third quarter was 41-15 last night, but Knicks came back home. Karl had a great surge there to get them back in the game after falling behind early, and then, I thought it was mostly just about the Heat reverting back to who they've been rather than anything we really saw or learned about the Knicks.
Right. And Josh Hart, triple-double, tying Clyde Frazier for the franchise record single-season triple-doubles. I think he's now at 8. Got a couple weeks to overtake Clyde. I think he had a little message for Clyde in that process last night, too. And Josh Hart, again, talking about seesaw, coming off a game where he really struggled against the Warriors, bounces back in a big way against Miami. I'm wondering for you, Troy, Josh, are you one of the people that would like to see Josh coming off the bench? Do you see him as a good cog in the starting five? Where are you at with Josh?
It's funny because Josh Hart for me was somebody initially starting off the season. You guys remember him saying, he doesn't know where he fits in the offense. And then he says that, and now he has a season that he has. So I think with Josh Hart and him being a starter right now, it obviously works because he does everything, all the little things that the starters don't do. When you have him on the bench, I can understand it during certain situations. You may want to put him on the bench. Maybe if you're going up against certain teams, certain lineups, if you want to, match certain lineups, maybe you do that. But I think for the most part, you've seen Josh Hart start the entire season, and I think good things have happened because of it. So it would surprise me heavily if he were to end up on the bench at some point in time, unless it's for a matchup situation in the postseason.
Tim, the shouting between Thibodeau and Hart in Golden State, cameras catch it, but you've been around this team, you've been around the league for a long time. Do we make too much of that, or is there more context needed? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, look, Tom and Josh are both wired in similar ways. I didn't really make much of it at all. Obviously it's been a long couple of weeks for the Knicks. Jalen Brunson gets hurt. They lose a couple of close games. You had the whole Mikal Bridges minutes thing. I think it's ultimately just much ado about nothing. And when you're in a situation like we are in the Eastern Conference as a whole, where there's really nothing to talk about for the next 4 to 6 weeks, really, until at minimum when the playoffs start, we're just going to be finding stuff to talk about. And I think this thing is just the latest example of that. And there's probably going to be several more between now and late April.
And let's hope so, because we need some topics here to get us
Certainly
through to the into the regular season. It's speaking of that game last night. Obviously, Towns goes on that 15-0 heater. And it's interesting because you're seeing now more of Towns and Mitchell Robinson on the floor together. Knicks are obviously taking a look at that. 19 minutes, I believe, so far. The defense has been very strong. It's a small sample size, obviously, Troy, but what do you see from that lineup? Do you like it? Do you want to see more?
It is phenomenal, Ian. Last night, I think we saw them play, like you said, the most minutes together that they played in the fourth quarter. And you think to yourself, why is he playing them in the fourth quarter? And I'm part of the minutes police, by the way, so I can say this. Why is, we're up, 20 points, 24 points. Why are they in? But then you realize they're in there because they need to gain chemistry. They need to understand how to play with each other. Mitchell Robinson has been out the entire season. And Robinson by himself had a very good game, probably his best game back as a Knick last night against the Heat. He was blocking shots. He was getting rebounds. He was actually putting the ball on the floor in the paint and making a shot inside the paint. This Mitchell Robinson has not been seen before. If he can get it together, gain that chemistry and the trust, which Towns mentioned at the after the game as being a big factor for these guys. If they can get that together, they are going to be a dominant duo come the postseason. And I'm not saying it's something that could potentially start, but if it's something you can go to late in game to close out for that defense, you have Karl Towns inside, then you have Mitchell Robinson able to go out to the perimeter, it changes the Knicks defensively. And I think the numbers speak for that as well, too.
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson was in good spirits last night after the game, just joking around with Mikal Bridges and others. They were having a good time. So it's good to see the big man back and happy again after dealing with so many injuries, particularly this last one that dragged on. And Tim, looking at the defensive numbers recently, they've been very strong. The last 5 games before that Heat game, Knicks were number 3 defensive rating, and it coincides with Robinson, coincides with Jalen Brunson being out. You see stuff that is sustainable even when Brunson returns from this defense that, the Knicks can look to and fans can look for?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I certainly think Mitchell Robinson will help them a little bit. Being able to play him and Karl Towns together some will help. But, respectfully, Mitchell Robinson is not going to play that many minutes, and he's not Rudy Gobert. Like, he's a nice player, and he's a good offensive rebounder. But, I don't think he's going to resolve the Knicks' issues. And certainly when the Knicks are playing the Boston Celtics in the second round, the team they've gotten drilled by 3 times this year, I don't think Mitchell Robinson helps them at all against the Celtics. So, yes, he's a useful player. He gives them more depth. He gives them more size. He gives them a different dimension. But I've thought the whole season that he doesn't really change the Knicks' ceiling or the Knicks' path, because I just don't think you can play him much with Karl Towns anyway. And this has been a nice stretch that they've played, but I just don't ultimately think it's going to have a huge bearing on how the rest of their season goes.
Right. And I guess a bigger picture question, Tim, before we get to a rare Jim Dolan interview is, what is the path right now? I mean, is it second round and out and then add around the margins? Because obviously they want to win a title badly here. They want to be a championship contender. Doesn't seem like they're at that level right now. How do you see this shaking out this spring and then into the summer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see how the Knicks are going to get out of the second round. I mean, they're really locked into the 3. The Celtics are locked into the 2. And, I mean, look, I was at all 3 Knicks-Celtics games this year. They got drilled in all 3 games, and they weren't as competitive as the final score indicated. And it's just a horrible matchup for the Knicks. And I don't – again, look, injuries could happen. We saw Indiana get to the conference finals last year in part because Giannis Antetokounmpo got hurt and half the Knicks got hurt, right? So certainly – there's a world where that kind of thing happens and maybe the Knicks find themselves in the conference finals. But I just think if you look at it right now, they might be the 5th best team in the league, 5th or 6th or 7th. Like, they're somewhere in that kind of range. The problem is either the best or second best team in the league is going to be waiting for them in the second round of the playoffs. And there's just no real way around that. And then when you look ahead to the summer, all right, well, what do the Knicks do? They don't really have a lot they can do. As you guys both know, they traded just about everything they had nailed down to get Karl Towns, to get Mikal Bridges. They put this team together with the thinking that, okay, we're going to have a 4 or 5 year window where this team could potentially be good enough to win. And then they might be right. I mean, the Celtics only have another year or 2 at max with this current group before they're going to have to start shedding some money to clear payroll and get their luxury tax bill down from the $500 million number they're looking at for next season. But we could also be looking at a situation where the Cleveland Cavaliers are just a younger, better version of the Knicks, potentially, at least, if this regular season means anything. So, none of that, I don't mean that to sound completely defeatist if you're a Knicks fan listening, thinking that there's absolutely no path for this team going forward, because I don't think that's the case. Like, I do think when you have an extended runway with a team in the current league with the financial restrictions that are coming online, you're going to have an opportunity or a few opportunities to break through. But, they are, I think, going to need either something to materially change with the roster or something to materially change with the teams around them because, I do think they could beat the Cavs in a series, but I don't think they can beat the Celtics. And as of now, it's hard to see how the Knicks get better outside of other teams getting worse.
Yep, the injury factor is something you mentioned, Tim, and that always creeps up some way, somehow. Interesting thing to me is if this creeps up and bites the Knicks again, let's say in the second round of the playoffs, how much is the discussion about minutes over the course of the season, Tom Thibodeau, that theme that Mikal Bridges, brought to the forefront last week. I just wonder how that plays out if the Knicks are the team that deals with injuries. But Troy, James Dolan sitting down for a rare interview, the friendly confines of the Roommates pod. He was being interviewed by Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson. And I'm sure you saw it, Troy. And as someone who has rooted hard for this team for a long time, followed this team for a long time, what were your impressions of the owner?
It's James Dolan, I feel like, has had the biggest story with the fans across the league because initially, if you followed this team for a long time and you saw Dolan's involvement with the team a couple of years ago, you have a certain feeling about him. But he's been kind of not gone, but not around the Knicks for a while. You're not seeing him kind of out of sight. But then sometimes you see him outside of some of the other issues that happen, obviously, around the NBA. But apart from that, he's not really doing much with it. You don't really see him a lot or not around the team a lot. So you don't know what's going on. In this interview, I felt like it was a huge, opening for fans who don't really know Dolan, know what's been happening with the team or what's been going on with the team to understand where he is, his role, Leon Rose, where he is, and his faith in the team and everything that he spoke about with this current roster. One of the biggest things, and one of my takeaways from the interview is the fact that he said with this team, he expects them to be together for the long haul, for the long term, play many, many seasons together. And the reason I mentioned that, I'm sure you know it as well too, Ian. There's a number of reports out there almost weekly with, the Knicks linked to this star or that star or this star and maybe potential moves that could happen in the offseason. But hearing Dolan say that, it kind of made you think to yourself, well, this is the team that we have moving forward. And if that's the case, what can we add to it to be better? Because I do agree with Tim in that regard that the Knicks do have this squad and it is good. They can compete, but to what level? How far before they reach their ceiling? Because I do think there is some things that are still needed to add here. But as James Dolan mentioned in that interview, it's likely this is the team that we're going to have for the long run moving forward.
I would just add there quickly that, yes, Dolan did say that, and obviously he signs off on everything that ends up being decided. But any kind of big decision there, I think, would be Leon Rose's to really make. And so I just think that going into the postseason, you see how things shake out. You see if anything shakes loose. There are nuclear options there that I don't think the Knicks want to do, but they are there if certain situations arise and you flame out in the postseason. So I wouldn't necessarily, set in stone the idea that everybody who's here now is going to be here the next 4 or 5 years. Tim, what did you take away from Dolan's interview there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the main takeaway in general, right? On Hoop Collective, we have a long-standing motto that I coined, which is actions over words. And I don't really care what James Dolan said on the Roommates podcast, right? The question will be, what does he decide to do if the Knicks get swept in the second round, if they lose in the first round, if they lose in 7 games in the second round, if they make the conference finals, right? Like, whatever the end of the season is, that's, to me, and what their reaction is to that, that's what's going to matter. It's very easy to go on the Roommates pod and say, hey, you guys and none of your teammates are ever getting traded. It's going to be great. Like, it would be quite something, even by Dolan standards, to go on there and say everybody's on watch on a podcast with 2 of his players. So let's wait and see what happens this spring and summer if the Knicks fall short again. Because, look, let's go back to last summer. The weird thing about the moves the Knicks made, in my opinion, was there was no clamoring for the Knicks to do anything. Like, Troy and every other Knicks fan was very happy with where the team was. They finally had some sustained success. They made the second round a couple of years in a row, right? There wasn't any disappointment even at losing to Indiana. The whole team got hurt. They're like, oh, yeah, whatever. Like, everybody got hurt, and it happens, and we'll come back next year and see where the Knicks are at. Well, then they turn around and trade everything they had nailed down for Karl Towns and Mikal Bridges. Well, that naturally brings expectations of this team is going to take steps forward. And if they don't take steps forward or they take a step backward, then what's the reaction to that going to be? I think we would all agree there shouldn't be a dramatic reaction to that. It should just be, all right, let's just keep moving forward and try to add some depth pieces and see what it looks like next year. But I don't think we can guarantee that there won't be any dramatic reactions. We've all been around New York and around the Knicks long enough. So, it all goes back to the same thing, which is actions over words. And let's see what happens in April, May, and June on in the court. And then let's see what happens in May, June, and July off the court as a result of whatever does happen.
Right. And I did think it was interesting, too, that Dolan talked about a succession plan. No plans to sell either the Knicks or the Rangers, would like to keep it in the family. He's mentioned that in the past, and just him reiterating it lets you know kind of what the future is with this team. And I don't know, where the team is going to go, who inherits it, but Quentin Dolan, one of Jim Dolan's sons, has a high-ranking position at MSG Sports and by all accounts is doing a great job. So it'll be interesting to see where that shakes out years from now. But in the here and now, Troy, when you hear your owner talk about Leon Rose the way he did, just your thoughts on the hire and what he said on the Roommates pod about hiring Leon and his rationale behind it.
I thought that with Dolan regarding Leon, the fact when he had the call with him and he said that it was a really easy decision regarding Leon just accepting it. And I think when Jalen Brunson was talking about it, and he said, his agent basically left him. And the way he said it was that he was happy for him because he was going to New York. And when he joined New York, he said that he didn't think Leon Rose would have ever took this opportunity or done this unless it was for a team like the New York Knicks. And I think that tells you what it means to bring or win a championship and bring it to New York, how much of a feeling and a meaning that is to anybody in sports, regarding if you're a player or an executive, whatever it is. That's exactly what I think Leon Rose was hired here for. And I think he even mentioned it. He has executed his plan to exactly the way he said he was going to do it. And a lot of times when, Dolan speaks about these things, I listen to it because I absolutely believe what he's saying here. And when he said that Leon Rose made all these moves and the plan went exactly as he said it was going to go, I was actually pretty shocked by that. Could not believe it. And I think Leon Rose has done a good job. And I think that's exactly what Dolan basically said during that entire interview.
Yeah, some fun stuff there. I always appreciate when we see James Dolan on camera doing interviews. Doesn't happen often, but it's always interesting when it does. We are going to pivot now to the What We Learned section of the show. What We Learned, presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. Jalen Brunson, obviously, all Knick fans want to know, when's he coming back? Is he going to be back before the postseason? That's an obvious goal, right? To get him back before the playoffs, at least in the conversations I've had. I don't think anybody wants him going into game one of a playoff series cold, coming off an injury, not having played any games. So that's first and foremost. And, we noted it after the injury, the scan and the x-ray led people to kind of breathe a sigh of relief, led people to believe that it was not as bad as it looked, and they had avoided, those worst case sprains, like the grade 3 sprains were avoided. And so it was more so week by week than it was, several months out. And we're going to get an update this weekend, Tim, but with Jalen out, what have you learned about this group?
I'm not honestly sure we've learned that much, right? I mean, we know who the Knicks are when Jalen Brunson's out there. And if the Knicks are going to go anywhere, they're going to need Jalen Brunson out there for 40-plus minutes a game, right? I mean, we already knew that Deuce McBride is a really good backup point guard, probably one of the best backup point guards in the league. So, I mean, I think they've sort of just done more or less what I expected. I mean, going 3-3 in these 6 games is right about what you'd think, right? They beat Sacramento and Portland. They lost to the Clippers, Lakers, and Warriors, and they came home and beat the Heat. Like, that's all pretty much exactly what I would have thought. So, Tom Thibodeau has always done a good job, as you guys both know, at all of his stops of sort of maximizing the players he has available, and he's always done well when he's had shorthanded teams. And I'm sure these guys will continue to crank out some wins until Jalen's back. But, to me, the real question is just going to be, what can those guys do guarding at the highest level in the playoffs? And we're probably not going to learn that until we get Jalen Brunson back on the court, see what he looks like, and then see who the Knicks are facing off with in the first round of the playoffs in a few weeks.
Right. And we were critical of the 2 wings, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, back when the Knicks lost to Boston around that stretch. And those guys, to me, have played really well. Not every game, but whether it's one or the other across this stretch without Brunson, I've been impressed, especially Bridges, very efficient. So those 2, maybe that there's some carryover there, but I agree with you, Tim. There's not a lot to take away. People talk about the ball movement. Well, listen, you're not in this position with the Knicks, having these pieces here, being a contender the way you are without Jalen Brunson, without the ball in his hand. So I think that's a bit of an overreaction. But Troy, I'm curious, from your perspective, what have you taken away from this group and their games without Brunson?
Well, it's when I watch this team without Brunson, I always look toward the end of quarters, toward close games to see how they can close without JB. Because the biggest thing for me with this Knicks team is how the bench looks and how this team responds to adversity under certain situations. If it's a close game, for instance, who's going to take over if Brunson's not there? In certain situations, like against the Warriors, really, we had nobody. Once the game was tied late, nobody could really close out that game. If the Knicks are blowing out a team and they're moving the ball and they're doing all of this, that's really the best way to win without Brunson, giving yourself such a huge lead that nobody else can come into the game late in the game and take over it. I thought this team responded exactly how I expected them to. I thought they would be better defensively with Miles McBride into the starting lineup. That has definitely been the case as well. Their defense with Brunson out has taken a step up. With Brunson coming back, the interesting part is, will the defense go back to what it was, or will it continue to remain the same? Now, if you take Deuce out, it kind of leads you to believe that the defense will probably go back to what it was. But that defense and how good it looks now, that needs to continue when Brunson comes back, because it's one of the biggest things that you can take away from this team without Brunson. Defensively, it just looks a little bit more night and day. Now, maybe that has to do with Mitchell Robinson being back in the lineup. We'll have to wait for Brunson to come back to see what it looks like. But defensively, I mean, that's the biggest takeaway for me without this team with Brunson. And also, who else is going to be able to close games without Brunson? And right now, there's really nobody on that list.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can take away that the Knicks are better on defense without Jalen Brunson, but you're not going to say the Knicks shouldn't have Jalen Brunson on the court, right? Like, this is sort of the it's the problem with, I mean, problems maybe a strong word, but it's the complication of the way the Knicks are built. Like, if you've got him and Karl Towns, you're going to have an unbelievable offense, which they do. You're also going to have a pretty mediocre to bad defense, which when they're both playing, they do. And like, that's, the goal, I think, going back to the summer, I sort of compared them to the Nuggets when they won the title a couple years ago. That team was somewhere in the 12 to 15 range. So can the Knicks be a slightly above average defense with those guys? That, I think, is the real question. And I think so far, at least with Karl out there, the general consensus on that would have to be no, that they're not going to be an above average defense. And if they're not, it's, like I said, it's just hard to see the path beyond what we think they're going to be now, which is another second rounded out team.
Right. And we did see a little bit of a reunion of sorts with the Villanova boys plus Donte DiVicenzo in an ad. I believe it was a March Madness ad. And it seems like DiVicenzo, for so many Knicks fans, is the one that got away. I don't think that there's a realistic path, Tim, to this. But I just wonder for you, Knicks, at some point, not in free agency, trading for DiVicenzo. I don't see it. I think Minnesota wanted him in the deal for Towns, and also he's on a very good contract. So I don't see that transaction happening. Just curious, your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it could happen at some point in the future, right? It's not like these guys are 35, so I could see him coming back at some point down the road. But yeah, I mean, look, the Knicks, gave him up in the deal in part because, like you said, Minnesota valued him and valued his skill set, and he is on a great contract. So I would say it's unlikely. And look, I think this goes back to the question I had before. And I mean, honestly, I'm not a Knicks fan, so I'd be curious what Troy's opinion is as a Knicks fan. Not to take over hosting your show, but
Please do.
We're 2/3 of the way through this season after these trades. Like, would you have preferred that either they just made the Mikal Bridges trade and waited, or I think really overall, like, would you have preferred they just sort of kept their powder dry and waited a year and wait to see who was available potentially this summer via trade, as opposed to the path they took? Or do you feel good about the two moves they made with where everything sits on March 18th?
It's funny because initially when they made that move, I wasn't happy with it. I didn't like it because initially I thought that, when Towns came here, I knew what he was going to provide, but I always thought about the defense. And even when I accepted the move, I knew that Towns still wasn't going to be able to give you that defense. I honestly wanted to see how it looked like with Randall that 1 year before they made any moves. That's just me personally, just to see what that team could have done, because they already had the chemistry built in. So when you added the one piece to see what happened, and obviously that probably had chemistry with it because he's another Villanova guy, you thought that it could work. After they made the Towns trade, like I said, I was initially upset about it, but after the year he's had, the numbers he's put up, and what he's done on offense, it's really hard to say the Knicks made a bad move with the Towns trade, given what he's done. But to your point, Tim, it all goes back to defense. And defensively, we all knew what Karl Towns was. And I think a lot of fans now, they're seeing Towns in, some defensive situations, not doing what maybe a Mitchell Robinson would do in that situation and kind of getting upset by it. But in my opinion, I kind of knew that, because I knew Towns was never going to be that level of defender. Maybe he could get better under Tom Thibodeau, a little bit of growth there, but nothing to change anything. So it is a good question that maybe a lot of fans, including myself, would have probably liked it if they waited a year, tried it with Randall, and then maybe afterwards see what happened. But we can't do that now, unfortunately.
I think one thing that's worth noting, I think the Bridges trade, sure, that's going to happen regardless. But I just wonder on the Towns deal, would they have been as aggressive if they thought Mitchell Robinson was going to be healthy for training camp? Obviously, they knew he was going to be out for a while when they traded for Towns. I think that factored in. And obviously, not being able to bring Hartenstein back was a killer for them, because he was such a huge part of what they did the year before. And the one thing on Randall, to me, if you're going to give it a shot with him for 1 year, you have to extend him, because having him go into a season where the expectations are super high and he's facing a little uncertainty with his deal potentially ending that summer, I just think that's a recipe for bad things. So if they were going to go in with Randall this season, I think you have to extend him. I don't think the sides ever got anywhere close on an extension, so I think that was part of it as well. And I just wonder too, like, how long can you wait? And then who else becomes available? There's always somebody available, like De'Aaron Fox. Like, there's always somebody who's going to be available. Tim, we talked about it, I think, for 5 years at this point. But teams hoping and praying that number 34 in Milwaukee saber rattles and tries to exit Milwaukee. But this thing is, it's always kind of difficult to pass on a trade like a Towns trade, because you don't know what's coming next.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is I do think it just locks you into a ceiling with your team. It's just very hard for me to see how Karl Towns as a center is going to be better than a team that's probably going to lose in the second round. And he's a great player. And Troy, you're 100% right. He's had a phenomenal season. He's adjusted to New York brilliantly. He's been super fun to watch. He was a deserving all-star starter. He's been great. But his flaws are so pronounced that it is going to be difficult for these guys to really advance beyond the team they are now. And there's again, you made these trades. This is the team they have. They are very much locked into this group. Now, maybe Karl will get better defensively. Maybe they can make some other moves. Maybe they do have really good players they can trade, even though they don't have draft picks. So they have some flexibility, but it was a fascinating bet at the time. And it's a fascinating bet going forward because, Ian, you cover the Knicks forever. You know how this is. They were so patient for so long in such a abnormal way for how the Knicks have operated. And then in a 3-month span, they pushed all their chips in on these two guys. And it's just a fascinating bet. And, it is a thing that we're probably going to be talking about for the next 3 or 4 years to see where it lands. But it's going to be really, really interesting to see what the ultimate ceiling of this group is. And, we'll probably look back in 2028 or so and say, we'll only probably until then be able to say, was this the right path for them to take or not?
Right. Yep. They do have a little bit of a runway here. With that, we are going to move on to the Talkback section of the show where we take questions from you, and we're joined by my friend and yours, Matthew Spendley, the Big Spend. He has got some questions to relay to us. Matt, what do you have?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on, and thank you for joining. I want to start with Mikal because I know we've talked about him a little bit, and last 5 games since Brunson's been out, 3 times he's got to the line at least 4 times. Before that, in the rest of the season, he had been at least 4 times to the line in 5 games. So he's been much more involved. I think he's also been more aggressive. So, Troy, I want to start with you, just what you've seen from Mikal since Brunson's been down.
I think Mikal Bridges has stepped up, especially after that conversation, I think, with Tom Thibodeau. Not saying he wasn't having a great season beyond that, but I think after he had the conversation with Thibs, they kind of cleared the air and had everything out. I mean, he hit the game winner that night after he had the conversation. So, I mean, clearly something's working, something's clicking. His aggressiveness, his ability to attack the rim, attack and get free throws, which he really wasn't doing a lot. This is the type of Mikal Bridges the Knicks traded for. You need that aggression. And honestly speaking, something that I want to see from Mikal Bridges, and I hope the Knicks will do this at some point in time, he needs more opportunity with the ball in his hands. I think he can thrive if he's able to do that. It might even get him going earlier on. And I think the way to do that is to really have him play the RJ Barrett role. And the way to do that is to sub him out early and have him play more minutes with the second unit. Now, it's kind of hard to say that when you see Karl Anthony Towns drop 15 points straight last night playing with that same second unit. However, I think Mikal Bridges has it in him to be able to lead a second unit, and I think the Knicks have the opportunity to do that now with him.
And, Tim, I know we talked about this a little before, but I'm curious for you as we approach the playoffs. I think there's been a thought, well, listen, you have Brunson out. Now you have these guys that can kind of be a little more ball dominant. Ian mentioned OG and Mikal that have done more scoring, and then you place Brunson right back in, and then boom, they're more comfortable. They've been more involved in the offense. So I'm curious, approaching the playoffs for a guy like Mikal that has had to step up in Brunson's absence, do you see that being a big difference, or do you think once Brunson's back, they'll kind of just settle into the roles that they had?
The Knicks didn't have an offensive problem. They had one of the best offenses in the league. This is a semi-ridiculous conversation. I don't mean your question directly, just like the whole idea of like, well, what do they have to do with Mikal Bridges? Their offenses were already one of the best offenses in the league. That's why you have Jalen Brunson and Karl Towns. Like, yeah, those guys are going to have the ball in their hands more because they're way better offensive players than Mikal Bridges and way better offensive players than OG Anunoby and Josh Hart. Like that's how this works. It's not like, well, hey, we've got to make Mikal and OG feel good, so we're going to take 20% of the touches from the 2 better players to like give these guys the ball more. Like the Knicks had, I think they've been top 3 in the NBA in offense all season. I think they're still there, right up there with Boston and Cleveland. So I don't think any of this has to do with the offense. It all goes back to the other end. Now, I guess you could say, well, is Mikal Bridges going to guard better if he has the ball a little more? Sure. But I haven't watched the Knicks this year and felt like Mikal Bridges just isn't involved. I mean, he is getting to the line a little bit more because he is probably being a little bit more of an attacker with Jalen Brunson out, but he and OG are still getting plenty of shots. So to me, everything about the Knicks goes back to me, how good can their defense be and what do they have to do to try to get better at that end? And anything about their offense, like I think with Jalen and Karl Towns, especially the way Jalen has operated in crunch time, I don't think they should change anything at that end of the court at all. Sure.
Totally fair. Ian, you have any other thoughts on Mikal, especially after his conversation with Tibbs, which I know you had reported on?
Yeah, I think that the one thing where I go is sometimes, and it's been referenced in this locker room, when this team is hitting shots, they do play harder on defense. That was an issue that Mikal Bridges brought up regularly earlier in the season. So not saying specific to Bridges or OG, but I think there is something to player kind of being involved offensively, being in a rhythm offensively, and then defending better. So maybe that I don't even see that as a huge factor here because we don't have the evidence of Bridges, again, like Tim said, not giving you 100% effort on defense. I think he has done that night in and night out. So, yeah, everybody kind of reverts to their roles pre-Brunson injury, and you lean on the defense and you see where the defense is. That's where this thing is going to tilt, win or lose.
Sure. All right. So we got 15 games left for the Knicks before the playoffs. So I'm going to ask each one of you guys, going to go right down the line, starting with you, Troy. Last 15 games, what are you looking for? What's important before the playoffs?
With the Knicks, I think right now is just gaining that chemistry together, playing together, making sure that they understand what that first unit and second unit are going to look like. Really, the Knicks don't have a bench unit like that right now. Some people, sometimes Shamet will play, Precious will play. We haven't even seen what will happen when Deuce goes back and Brunson comes back. This Knicks second unit has been a problem this entire year, and not being able to solve that has been an issue, and it will continue to be an issue. If they want to have success in the postseason, they have to use the remaining games to gain the chemistry, build the trust, not only with the starters, but also with that second unit.
Ian?
Jalen Brunson's ankle. I think it's as simple as that. I think that, nobody wants Brunson. Nobody, meaning people with the Knicks, want Brunson going into the postseason cold, having not played any games. So the key is to get him 100% healthy. He might be pushing to get back before he's 100%, but I think everybody over there wouldn't let that happen, would want him to be 100% healthy before he returns to the court. Get him in a few regular season games, allow him to get some rhythm, and then you go from there. I think that is probably the biggest key for this team is the health of the ankle, getting him back on the court before the postseason.
Yeah, Jalen Brunson's health for sure. Yeah, Jalen Brunson's health for sure is the obvious one. And then, I have been definitely the one downplaying Mitchell Robinson's impact of basically everybody around the Knicks all season. But he is back healthy. He's got to get himself in shape and in rhythm, get him out there with Karl Towns some. Again, we're talking about 19 minutes on the court together. There's really nothing to be gained from that. But they've got a month to play. Get them some minutes together, get Robinson out there for an extended period and see what he looks like. I think those are the only two things that matter, because with 5 losses separating them from Boston in second and Milwaukee and Indy in fourth, there's really nothing to worry about or even think about from a standings perspective. And frankly, it's that way across the entire Eastern Conference. It's pretty weird. There's really not anything to talk about for the final month of the regular season other than this desultory race for these play-in spots where all these teams are losing all the time, and then where Milwaukee, Indy, and Detroit all finish. So beyond that, it's just about the Knicks getting healthy and seeing what Mitch looks like.
And there is to talk about, because it's March, though, in New York, St. John's. Last thing, Ian, I know you tweeted about it. How far is St. John's going in the tournament this year?
They're definitely going to get to the second weekend. I just worry that the shooting kills them in one of those games in the second weekend. So, yeah, I'll say out in the Sweet 16.
All right, you're on the record. Thank you, guys.
Fellas, we're gonna wrap here because Tim brought it up, and it's a good point. The only thing that I think is worth watching right now is that Indy, Milwaukee, Detroit kind of race, if you want to call it that, because it impacts who the Knicks match up against. Troy, I'm going to start with you. The team that you fear the most out of Indy, Detroit, and Milwaukee.
Team I fear the most. I got to say it, man. I think Detroit is a monster this year. And I think it's really because of that guy, Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham and the way that he's playing right now, he's leading that team by himself some nights. But I think the bench as well, too, that they have a very strong bench. They have the depth. I'm not saying that the Knicks are going to have a problem with them. I think if the Knicks saw them, I think they would be able to contain them. The reason I say they could be the biggest obstacle for New York is because they're a question mark. I don't know what they're going to do in the postseason. Maybe they could turn it up. I'm not sure. The obvious one is obviously the Bucks. That's why I didn't want to say it, because it's the more obvious one.
Yes, the Bucks are the answer. The Bucks are the answer. This is a Knicks fan trying to sandbag his team. The Bucks have Giannis Antetokounmpo. They are the team that the Knicks should not want to play in the first round of the playoffs. That's very open and shut. Easy answer. Indiana's very good. They have a elite offense. It could be a difficult series, certainly for the Knicks. The Pistons have been a great story. Cade's having a phenomenal year. JB Bickerstaff has done a great job. But this is a very easy answer. The Knicks don't want to play the Bucks in the first round. They're easily third of the three options.
Man, we went to Detroit, like obviously great season. They've had some great performances in the Garden, but that's a young team without the playoff experience. So you wonder how they react to that big stage too, and that's just something I think about when you think about that Pistons matchup. But we're going to see how things shake out over the remaining few weeks of this regular season. Tim Bontemps, ESPN Senior NBA writer, Troy Mahabir, the Knicks recap show on YouTube. Catch them on all your social media channels. Really appreciate you guys joining me, and that's going to do it for us here on the Putback. We've got another show in 2 weeks, and next week we're going to do a mailbag. So keep those questions coming in for that mailbag, and we'll talk to you then.